please make sure you're back in the auditorium for 11:30. And yeah, everyone's free to go get a coffee and rest for a bit. Thank you. I hope everyone had time for a quick coffee and a break. Just wanted to ask everyone to please take their seats as we will be starting with the next plenary session that begins in only 2 minutes at 11:30. So please take your seats as we will be beginning shortly. Thank you very much. Right. As I mentioned, we are going to continue now with our plenary session. This session presents, Responsible by Design, the strategic guidance report of the Global Commission on Responsible AI in the Military Domain, and it will be moderated and conducted by Dr. Denise García from the Northeastern University in Boston. The floor is yours, and let's give them a welcome applause. Thank you.
Muchas gracias, Ladies and gentlemen, it's an honor for me to be here with my distinguished colleagues with whom I had the honor to work in the last 2 years on the Global Commission. We are here to present our strategic guidance report that was launched 2 months ago at the first high-level meeting on the Security Council at the United Nations in New York by the Prime Minister of the Netherlands. So indeed, our goal, and you see a photo of most of us, but not all, the Commission was fairly large. And we served as an international platform, multi-stakeholder dialogue, supporting fundamental norm development and seeking for policy coherence amongst the so many epistemic communities working on this area. We promoted mutual awareness and understanding amongst us all. And of course, on September, as I mentioned, we had the publication of our guidance.
Yes, So, as Denise has rightly started to explain, I'm going to now follow on with the structure of the commission. So we were made up by 18 commissioners and 31 experts from the advisory group. We were a multidisciplinary group of people clustered by AI, computer science, ethics, law and society, and norms and governance, and military AI expertise. The commission is headed by a chair, our lovely former foreign minister from Korea, and it was supported by Secretariat, the Hague Center for Strategic Studies, and it was headed by Michelle Rademacher. And we were divided into 4 work streams. The first one was the technological foundations. So here we put together different contributions to common knowledge and understanding, creating a taxonomy of different AI use cases and serving as a reference point for other work streams. The second one, which I had the privilege of co-leading with Denise, was the implications for peace, security and stability. Here we looked at the broader implications within this peace and security domains and the integration of AI within the military throughout different lenses of the risks, and suggesting some mitigation strategies within this view. The next one was decision-making and responsibility, where we answered, or tried to answer, some key questions related to the relation between humans and AI and the respective consequences for responsibility by reviewing the vocabulary and concepts used in related fields. And the fourth one, last but certainly not least, was governance and regulation. So educating, or trying to illustrate the broader community of regulation and governance, knowledge gaps, and reviewing the instruments and frameworks available to all of the different stakeholders that are involved in this field. You can see them all here in our lovely report.
Well, I would just like to take the opportunity to then highlight the structure of the report, which follows very closely from the various work streams that were divided. Various sections that first provides the context for what we are talking about when we talk about military AI, and then thinking about both the risks as well as the opportunities that are presented when people consider AI in military applications. But then we thought about proposing certain guiding principles and certain recommendations for different stakeholders, both states, but also the industry and also civil society to consider. And last but not least, updates since we started work in 2024, and some general thoughts on how we want to move forward. Next.
Coming up, my friend.
All right.
Here we go.
Yeah, so I think what is unique for the Commission is really trying to place AI in the military context. We know of many other reports that have extensive coverage of AI in different domains. What our report tried to do is to really focus on what is so unique about military applications and how do we think about the intersection. In the slide, you see, 3 different characteristics, whether it's incomplete information, classified nature of systems and procedures, or the need for decision-making at a high tempo. But I think for people wearing uniform, you will understand ultimately there's a lot of interest in making sure that the applications of AI in the military domain supports the missions that you need to execute and achieve. And the idea is then how to think about the military structures and the processes and how AI interacts with those different elements that we are familiar with in the military system.
So we actually spent some time trying to characterize artificial intelligence systems. We had a technical stream, and we were very successful in this. There are, of course, many divergent possible ways of defining this or characterizing this. You'll read in the left panel two of them, but what it basically comes down to is we characterize it as a system that, for some kind of objective, either implicit or explicit, will be able to take inputs and generate outputs, and typically the outputs encompass recommendations or actions to be conducted or something along those lines. And very importantly, these are actions which will either influence a kind of virtual world or, more interestingly, will influence the physical world. So in other words, cyber-physical systems, which are an important additional characteristic. The Venn diagram that you see there is another important and probably for many of you well-known way of characterizing this, with artificial intelligence as a whole consisting of, in the left side, the, let's say, traditional symbolic artificial intelligence, which is the, in some sense, the original work. And of course, machine learning of various kinds, and within machine learning, we go all the way down to generative AI systems, which fall within deep learning systems. And we have crossovers within that as well. So neuromorphic computing or neuromorphic and semi-symbolic computing are one of the ones that cross over between those and provide a measure of explainable AI. Thank you, Denise.
You're welcome, my friend.
So the limitations of AI were another thing that's very difficult to enumerate exhaustively, but we did focus on characterizing or writing out limitations which are in some sense founded on non-speculative work. So it's easy to come up with fear-mongering based on purely speculative ways of doing this, but we try to not overestimate but also not underestimate by using evidence-based ways of characterizing this and collecting the risks. So just to read you a handful of the risks that you see on this panel, but you'll also find back in the report. There's of course the well-known one in the top left corner, which is model dysfunction and performance limitations. This is probably one that occurs most frequently. But continuing clockwise, there's unpredictable outputs and, even more interestingly, emergent behavior. So things that were completely unforeseen and it starts managing to do on its own, another well-known characteristic. Hidden and systemic bias. This occurs, of course, not only in civilian systems, but also in military systems, based on the data and the outputs, so the bias appearing in both. Vulnerabilities in the bottom right corner to external attack or interferences. Another very important thing at the intersection between AI and cybersecurity. Opacity and the lack of explainability. So this is arguably the single biggest problem that we face in the technical side of the AI community, but also for any user of AI. And then finally, at the bottom left corner, the issue of brittleness, poor data integrity, which is remarkably prevalent given we need the data for training, and representativeness of the data. Thank you, Denise. So I'm not going to read you all of the details here, but it's important to realize that the AI lifecycle has been written out by a number of standards organizations. This is, of course, something that will be adapted per organization, in fact, adapted per project. And what we also recognize is it's not a case of one size fits all. This is a very dynamic, typically a very agile process from a software engineering, but also from a broader embedding standpoint. And in many cases, because it's iterative and because it actually shares a lot of AI development from one project to the next, you'll typically see a significant overlap between these. So this ranges from, of course, the things that are done before systems development. So this is scoping, for example, onwards to collecting the specifications under research and development, further on to the procurement and really deciding which systems to acquire. To the right, top right panel, which is of course considering the human factor in all of this, which is for us here at the summit, arguably one of the most significant aspects. Continuing to the political and strategic implications. And then without talking through the remaining ones, I do want to just point out the very last one, which is the retirement and decommissioning block, which is something that's very often ignored and omitted. Thanks, Denise.
Thank you, dear friend. Okay. Trying to get to the next slide. There we go.
Yeah. So I'll jump in on this. Of course, we understand in the civilian context how AI has transformed the way that we work, the way that we live in our personal lives. But when our commission looked at the specific uses of AI in the military domain, we were quite quick to distinguish between applications that we can see in the civilian domain, for which I think there are already a lot of conversations and research. And those are what we consider at the bottom left to be non-operational activities, things that you would imagine are very relevant in the civilian domain that militaries would also want to adopt, whether in terms of policy, training, logistics, and so on. I think the interest for us in the Commission is to really focus on the operational activities. Those are activities that are really attributed to militaries, and then you think about command control communications, and you think about platforms and weapon systems, and those are specifically areas or missions that militaries are charged with, making decisions, and if needed, to take out certain targets based on certain weapon matching. And I think these are the areas for which we want to better understand how AI would affect both in its impact and in its probability, and those are the areas on the right that we focused on in our research and our discussions.
Yes. Turn to Mahimira now.
Great. So now I will turn to a very important part, the context of peace and security. In our report, we recognized that AI as a category of technologies definitely represents a double-edged sword because of the dual use, repurposable, foundational nature, general purpose characteristics of the technologies, with rapid innovation driven by immense private sector investment and military demand alike, often coming at the cost of safe and responsible practices for the sake of speed and scale. So what we did here is we kind of grouped it. First, we looked at different risks in the context of peace and security, kind of like the main one was destabilizing international effects and worsening escalation dynamics. We also discussed a lot about this facilitating conventional and non-conventional weapons proliferation, especially to non-state actors. And also the increasing interstate dependencies and the influence of the private sector, raising obviously questions on sovereignty and many others. A different category that we listed were quote-unquote opportunities in the context of peace and security, which would be enhancing potentially early warning capabilities, potentially as well reducing chances of misunderstanding. And I do need to underscore the potential of this, and also potentially aiding arms control. We also looked at the different applicable international law in the context of peace and security, because as a baseline of our report, we always highlight and underscore the fact that international law does apply, and that everything that we are setting out in this in the recommendations of the report must always be anchored in international law. Different types of law. Obviously, IHL would be the primary or the first one to be thought of. However, also the law regulating the use of force, so jus ad bellum, and also principles of necessity, proportionality, immediacy, and attribution. But human rights law as well. Even we discussed environmental law and some others. Relevant norms and initiatives, we also link to them, because we are obviously not starting from scratch and we're not reinventing the wheel, and we do need to harness all of the different initiatives that are out there in the ecosystem. So for example, Track 1 dialogues, the United Nations Secretary General High-Level Advisory Body, which I had the privilege of serving in, the international dialogues on AI safety, just to name a few. But there are many others that are woven in, and that this process, Reaim, also is a part of this broader dialogue. So I'll leave it here.
My friend Thompson.
A very good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you very much, Denise. Thank you very much, colleagues. My name is Thompson Chengeta. I'm a professor of international law, and I'm from Zimbabwe, and I did serve as a commissioner in the GC Reaim and also part of the drafting committee. Before I make my remarks on the question of the context of armed conflict, I think I should start by explaining why we are talking about this context. My colleague Park was talking about the military context, and Jimena was referring to peace and security. Now, the reason or the background for this context, context which you're talking about, can be found on page 20 of this report, which we really encourage everybody to be able to access and really read on. So on page 20, you'll see that we explain that we are going to look on opportunities and risks that are presented by AI in the military domain. So both opportunities and risks. On the same page 20, we then explain that how we understand whether something is an opportunity or is a risk is context dependent. And these are the contexts that actually we are referring currently. But most importantly, on the same page 20, we mention that the interpretation of whether an application is an opportunity or is a risk should ultimately be decided by measuring it against international law. In other words, for you to say this is an opportunity that's being presented by AI in the military domain, you measure it against international law. If it's against international law or inconsistent with international law, it's not an opportunity. We also talk about the question of the adequacy of the measures which we are proposing to say their adequacy also depends with satisfying the standards that are already existing in international law. Coming to the question of the context of armed conflict, here the governing regime, so to say, is international humanitarian law, use in bello, or the law of armed conflict. And the principles that are listed there, for example, principle of distinction, necessity, proportionality, and humanity, are all very part of customary international law, which we actually do ask to say, when assessing the risks and opportunities that are presented by AI in the military domain, we need to be complying with those particular rules. If those rules are actually being violated, whether it's at the developmental stage, it's the deployment stage, or post-deployment, then that opportunity which is being presented by that application should be unacceptable. Now, moving to quickly to the next slide, given our time, is to say we realize also very importantly that although we may tag AI in the military domain applications military, it does not necessarily mean that they will always be used in the context of armed conflict. They may be used beyond armed conflict or in situations of violence that do not qualify as an armed conflict. In that particular regard, the regime of international human rights law is very important because there are risks that are presented to fundamental rights such as right to life, right to human dignity, right to non-discrimination. And we say again, whether it is at the development, deployment, or post-deployment stage, if the system that you're talking about will not be consistent with those fundamental human rights principles that are listed on the screen, then that system would be unacceptable. But we also recognize opportunities because, as I said, we're not only focused on risks to say if the systems are presenting opportunities that can enhance, for example, compliance with international human rights law, then that system perhaps will be accepted in that regard. And we also talk about the question of environmental protection. which is a very, very important aspect which we need to say during the developmental stage of these systems. There's access to natural resources, the mining of natural resources, the harm that may come with that, the degradation of the environment. And international human rights law do have jurisprudence or important principles that we ought to remember when we are actually suggesting governance. I would want to end there, but with just a caveat of saying, what we inform Denise, for example, the recommendation that we talk about, for example, recommendation number 1, is based on this concept which was saying, once we are locating risks and opportunities within the context of international law, our recommendation number 1 is to say governance must be founded, or the foundation of governance of AI in the military domain must be international law. Denise, I thank you.
Indeed. Thank you so much, my dear friend, for the passion, the enthusiasm, always. All of you, actually. So let's get to the core, and all eyes on stage for the beautiful implications for responsibility and accountability, the graphics there. My dear friend, would you like to say a few words about that?
Yes, I can just add 2 sentences there to say, again, this is almost the post-deployment stage, where we are saying the context of post-deployment. One of the things that we've been discussing, I think, for over a decade is the question to say the usage, especially autonomy in military domain, may actually result in issues of accountability gap or responsibility issues. The starting point, again, is to say we already have a good, so to say, regime on international law as far as responsibility is concerned. And this includes, for example, under IHO itself, international criminal law, which provides for individual and command responsibility, the law of state responsibility in the articles of state responsibilities of internationally wrongful acts. We say those principles, so to say, are important if, for example, the system or the application that you're talking about will present issues or are inconsistent with these rules under responsibility, so to say, then that system, in a way, should actually not be deployed. The point which I can emphasize, maybe at a personal point, is to say, it is the systems, the technologies that we are developing that ought to comply with the law, not the law being strained to accommodate upcoming technologies, because these rules which we've already agreed on is not an option. We don't comply with them because it's a good feel. It is an obligation to which we have already agreed to. So responsibility, again, in international law there, including ethics, play a fundamental role.
Wonderful, my dear friend. Thank you for that. Ladies and gentlemen, all eyes on stage for the beautiful graphics there that were designed by Sofia Romansky, who was our pen holder, our leader, and also responsible for all the graphics in this report. So Sofia, multi-talented there. So we left that part, our guiding principles. We talked about them throughout the process, but we left the actual crafting of that part for the end and the core recommendations for all stakeholders. And we remember the text messages, right? The long meetings and so many exchanges we had to get to that part. And the meeting at The Hague on the sidelines of NATO in the summer when it was very warm. So we put a lot of thought on the guiding principles. Indeed, we start with, of course, we are anchored in international law, guided by widely shared ethical principles that have been developing in this domain for the last years, but for over a century and centuries in the context of international law. And of course, we are always focused on the preservation of human life, AI for human life, and the preservation of future generations as well. So of course, on this instance, the second principle indeed calls for systematic and structured design, developing testing processes. And these processes should be carried out in a way that safeguard human agents' responsibility and accountability. And we counted on the brilliant, courageous work of so many people sitting right here in the audience right now who came before us. And of course, the third principle, of course, we sought to have individuals all the individuals involved in the development and the use of AI in the military domain must be supported institutionally in their countries, in their practices. Human understanding, effective oversight. We talked a lot about the need of education as well, for education in STEM, engineering schools, cross with ethical guidelines as well. The core recommendation for all stakeholders, I can't tell you how many versions and iterations of those 5 recommendations we had. And it was really very heartening for me personally to work with the colleagues here sitting next to me. They are very wise, they're very knowledgeable, and so many colleagues sitting at the audience as well. So I'll take a moment to thank everyone for their efforts, for their ingenuity, creativity, and knowledge. So, of course, again, the core recommendation for all stakeholders, international law. The second, of course, is perhaps our red line. So we recommend that states agree at a legally binding level that the decision to authorize the use of nuclear weapons should remain strictly under human control. The third recommendation, of course, again, goes through testing, rigorous testing that is human-centered and training along the lines as well. The fourth recommendation, indeed, is establishing a permanent, inclusive, multi-stakeholder, multilateral dialogue. And, of course, we already see that happening this year as a result of the General Assembly resolution at the first committee in 2025 that recommended that, and we're going to have the first dialogue in Geneva in June during 3 days. And the final recommendation, indeed, again, developing a centralized multi-stakeholder expert network, which we started with the Global Commission. We have created so many networks of colleagues, and we aim to take that forward at this moment now.
So while Denise covered the core recommendations, I think this slide shows how it is developed across the life cycle. And for military colleagues and colleagues from industry, actually, the life cycle approach is not unique. For current conventional military capabilities, you already have the process of design, development, and testing and evaluation, and then use and subsequently retirement. But we are thinking of the specific details that come into AI-enabled systems, and how do we then develop training, develop capabilities for people working in different parts of this life cycle to be involved, and what are the areas of technical training, TEVV training, standardization that needs to be established, such that the process that has been in place for conventional weapons can be updated and can incorporate the latest developments that are happening in the AI domain.
Thank you very much. Just also to say, the report also has specific recommendations that go to specific stakeholders, and in this particular regard, in relation to recommendations to states, we believe actually carry the primary obligations when it comes to international law and what happens whether within borders or outside their borders, is to say, number one, it is important that they adopt and publish national strategies and standards within their countries that can be able to inform, for example, non-state actors that are acting within their countries. And those standards, so to say, the important part of it is that those standards should be consistent with international standards or not undermine already existing international law. Most importantly, there is also a need, and I think this is one of the most important recommendations that we are urging to state, the establishment of a permanent, inclusive, and multi-stakeholder and multilateral dialogue on AI in the military domain. This is really, really key. The reason being that most initiatives so far that have been done at the international level, they explicitly, number one, exclude AI in the military domain. For example, some of you may be aware that the UN Secretary General yesterday actually published the 40 list of members who are going to serve in that scientific panel to deal with the aspect of AI in the civilian domain. So having a certain system or certain, so to say, mechanism that mirrors that is in this particular domain is very, very important. I would want, given the time, just to quickly move from there.
Wonderful. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm so sorry, the clicker doesn't really love me. So we advocated throughout a layered approach to global governance. And again, there are so many colleagues who worked on this particular part who unfortunately couldn't join us, but indeed we tried to make a very inclusive, layered approach to global governance that takes into account also the regional levels and initiatives that are happening elsewhere. So indeed here, very creative again, a creative graphic made by Sofia Romansky to demonstrate how the different synergies can be strengthened from the regional levels, the global levels, and using this very creative, again, way of showing a layered approach of global governance. I never had a clicker like this. So here we have the moment where we have the Prime Minister of the Netherlands.
Doing this.
Good job. And when he was at the first high-level meeting at the United Nations in New York, the first high-level meeting talking about AI and the consequences for international peace and security. And I remember very well, ladies and gentlemen, I was on the train back home. I live in Boston, and I took the train back home from the university to my house. And I had my headset, and I was listening to His Excellency launching our report, and I had tears in my eyes, and I had all the colleagues texting at the same time. And I believe this is the picture that either I or Thompson captured of the minister delivering when he raised the report. So very special moment for all of us. And we were watching him live in our different time zones. It was emotional. And we had some good quotes there, including from our High Representative for Disarmament Affairs, who accompanied us and inspired us throughout the process as well. Dear colleagues, I think we have time for entertaining a few questions. We would love to hear from you. Indeed, it's been an honor to serve in this commission along your side, and all the other colleagues, many colleagues sitting here in the audience, and the ones who could not make. I want to thank again our fearless leaders, Sofia Romansky and Michelle Rademacher, the Secretariat at The Hague. It was a pleasure and an honor to be there with them. So we are here at the conference today. We are at your service for questions, but I believe we have some time for a couple questions, or maybe even 3. So I'm delighted to entertain some questions that my colleagues will answer very aptly. Any questions? Excellent. Especially from anyone, any questions? That being the case, ladies and gentlemen, please allow me to again thank my distinguished colleagues for their patience, their wise counsel throughout this process, their smiles, your knowledge. Thank you again. Thank you for all the colleagues sitting at the audience. It was an inspiration to work with you, and I'm honored to close this session now. Thank you.
Thank you very much, panelists. Thank you, Denise. That was a very interesting session, and congratulations on all your work. Thank you. We are going to continue now with our next session, which is titled A Spain Roadmap, Strengthening Capabilities for the Future. This session is going to be led by Fernando Hernández Martínez. Fernando is a telecommunications engineer and advisor to the Secretary of State at Spain Ministry for Digital and Civil Service Transformation. His work sits at the intersection of advanced engineering, public policy, and emerging technologies, with a strong focus on cybersecurity, AI governance, and the protection of democratic and strategic digital assets. He has played a key role in shaping EU-level digital security policy, contributing to major regulatory frameworks while helping translate complex technologies into practical strategies for responsible innovation. And we will be continuing with that session in just one more minute. Please don't leave the room if you wish to attend, because we will be starting very, very shortly. We're just sorting out the microphones. So just one more minute and we'll get started. Thank you. Thank you, everyone, for your patience. We are ready to start now. So if we could please give a round of applause to Fernando, our moderator, and the panelists. They will join us on stage now. Thank you.
Good morning. You good? Okay. Welcome to Reaim Talks. Thank you very much for coming here to this panel called Spain Roadmap, Strengthening Capacities for the Future. My name is Fernando Hernández. I'm from the Secretary of State for Digitalization and AI. And in this panel, we are going to try to keep on going with this discussion of moving forward from principles to real capacities. We're going to try to talk on how states, what states need in terms of institutions, people, discussions we need to have in order to have responsible AI in the military under adverse conditions. Of course, I'm not the expert here, so I'm going to introduce you, the panelists. We have first here Denise García. She focuses on international law, international humanitarian law, security, how AI shapes peace, stability. So you have a huge expertise on all that, so thank you for being here. We also have Soraya Artiles. I'm pretty sure half of the room here knows her because she's told me. From the Ministry of Defense, she mainly bridges governance and operational practice across the entire AI lifecycle. More things like human control and auditability, but mainly those three. And we also have Estefania from the CCN, and I'm pretty sure we're going to learn a lot because she's going to focus on security evaluation, certification, also auditability for the AI-enabled systems. Thank you very much, the three of you. I'm going to break the ice with the audience. I'm going to quick show of hands to ask you. Maybe this is not very protocolary, but just a question. Just imagine you're on the field under pressure, and I'm going to ask you a question to raise your hand if your biggest fear is that your AI system is being attacked from the technical point of view. And okay, what if the question is your biggest fear is not know the data, so you're making mistakes on the decisions? Okay, and raise your hand. The third option would be, what if you're not able to prove who decided your decision? Okay, thank you very much for breaking the ice. Now we're more comfortable here in the discussion. Based on that, now the statement comes from you. So I also want to break the ice with you, and I'm going to ask a quick, straightforward question. What is the single biggest risk, okay, you worry about, and what is the single capacity that states must build first to manage? So if you have a statement for that, first, Denise.
Well, Fernando, again, thank you for having me. Muchísimas gracias. Es un placer estar aquí en ese bello país. Yo soy brasileña, pero también un poquito española. Bueno, well, the biggest risk for me is AI taking care of nuclear weapons. So AI should always be out of that sphere. Command and control, nuclear weapons should be under human control. That's the biggest risk for me. And build capacities. Perhaps we should build a repository of incidents, a way to report incidents that can occur. So that would be perhaps an idea for building capacity.
Pretty sure we're going to talk about that. Your biggest risk and capacity?
Thank you very much, Fernando. My biggest risk is confidence lie obtained for artificial intelligence models. The risk of an artificial intelligence giving us perfect digital lies, perfect authoritative responses, and then you think the answer is perfect, and then you believe this is true. For me, having a perfect answer is what human beings make things this is true, but in fact it's a lie. And the capacity that we should have to give for this false sense of security would be incorporate in our process forensic digital traceability. In order for us to trust on artificial intelligence, we have to trace each decision.
Okay. And last, your biggest risk and capacity?
Yeah, I belong to the CEN, so we are the National Security Authority, and for us, the main preoccupation is the vulnerabilities of the IA. Why? Because security is built of three pillars: people, procedures, and technical measures. And the weakest one is people. So we cannot rely on the weakest pillar. We should rely in the strongest pillar. And technical must be the strongest. And we need to test by means of security evaluation, by means of certifications, that the IA systems are free of vulnerabilities oriented to the IA.
Perfect.
To the AI.
So we have already three big statements. Now let's try to move to state capacity. I want to start with you, Denise, because if we look across the last two Reaims, so the first one and now the second one in Seoul, now here, if we think about now the UN resolution also moving forward, how do you see this? Do you think we're moving to realistically things already translated into practice? And if international law applies across the entire life cycle that we will see later on, what would be for you the minimum institutional and supervisory capacities that we should have in place?
Wonderful, Fernando. Thank you for this exciting question. Well, we have achieved, I think, a lot since the first Reaim in The Hague. The second one in Seoul has achieved the blueprint for action as well, on top of the call for action on the first one. And here in Spain, I think the synergies have been strengthened. And we really have, I see Reaim as having created a multi-stakeholder platform where there are so many different actors who attend the summits and who have met each other, who have forged relationships, and therefore ways to cooperate and collaborate. So indeed, thank you for the gracious Spanish hosts to taking that up further. And also, I would like to congratulate as well Spain for its leadership with Costa Rica on the creation on a parallel track of the scientific panel on AI at the UN in New York, and also the establishment of a permanent dialogue that will have its first meeting on the fringes of AI for Good in Geneva in June. So there are a lot of synergies. The ever-expanding global governance framework of AI is really developing in front of our eyes. If I see everything, I think, started about 13 years ago at the UN in Geneva with the first report on alerting us about autonomous weapons by the then Christoph Heinz at the Human Rights Council. And then the process progressed into what's called the CCW in Geneva, with conversations about a new treaty on autonomous weapons. So if we look back the whole decade ago, over a decade ago, until where we are now, looking at the whole of the domain of the military, I think it's very impressive. Mm-hmm. In terms of institutional and supervisory capacities, Fernando, I think I would have perhaps 3 points for us. So the first point is, putting simply, applying international law across the AI life cycle means finding ways to keep the human in control. And in other words, this means since the pre-design stage, throughout all the phases, with establishment of red lines, if possible, clearly outlined specifications, as Estefania and Soraya have already outlined. Indeed, and then we can, of course, talk about also long-term goals of enhancing education, on STEM, schools, etc. But we also have to pay attention now, Fernando, that countries have different capacities.
Yeah, I was going to ask about
right.
If you see the different countries and if that has to do with AI diplomacy or with the speed of the technology moving forward.
Exactly. So international law is always lagging behind technological advancement. If you think about even the first nuclear weapon explosion that happened in 1945, it took many years for the first international treaty regulating nuclear weapons to come about, and that was 1968 with the Nuclear Proliferation Treaty. So indeed, we need to find ways now for cooperative compliance between countries to bridge those gaps, and the Geneva conversations coming up in June are very important for that, I think, and we hope to be there together. But I think indeed, again, with the Spanish leadership here, I think, and leading up to Geneva, what I thought is also perhaps an European Union common position, because the European Union has so much power, Fernando, as you know better than I, but so a common position would be a fantastic momentum builder for this process. But indeed, I think still in this first point, countries should think about leading up to the Geneva conversations in June. Control and command of nuclear weapons should remain under the human. That's a very straightforward, I think, first line of action. We could perhaps take up the International Committee of the Red Cross position on all this, which has two different ways we could approach. The ICRC says we should prohibit unpredictable weapon systems that do not allow the human user to understand, as the black box, understand the system safety. And then the ICRC tells us to prohibit autonomous weapons designed to target humans, so anti-personnel systems. So we could think about these concrete ways to prepare for leading up to Geneva. We could think again of the norm on the use of force and see how AI's perhaps systems are imperiling this very fragile norm now. We could think about the incidents report, the incidents repository that I suggested. The second point here, very quickly, Fernando, I think I already touched upon, but it's this, we could think of this advancement of the global governance framework that has been expanding, and A Coruña was, I think, a pivotal moment for that, indeed. And I would say the third point is that we should all prepare to hit the ground running in Geneva. So if A Coruña is about implementation, about really, having everything ready and more advanced in a pragmatic way, I think we should all look forward to the 3 days of talks in Geneva on AI in the military domain for the first time, as mandated by the General Assembly resolution last December, and really hit the ground running, have concrete proposals, have perhaps an alliance of middle powers and small powers, as Spain is also in the leadership.
So let's work now so we can bring realistic things in Geneva in some months.
Correct.
Right?
We shouldn't wait for the statements in Geneva, right? As you are suggesting, we should work now. We should start working. I wish I could stay here in La Coruña and do so, but have to go back home and work and go back to the classroom. But yes.
So if that is more or less the governance baseline, I'd like to hear from you, Soraya. How can we translate that governance framework into concrete tactical and operational practices? I'm pretty sure we need to ensure traceability, of course, human control, in all the decision-making lines. So what's your view on this? How can we assure that we translate that governance into realistic things on the field?
Well, I believe we have to face the black box problem. We have to go from governance, we have to try to learn on technical and operational things, to learn and not to crash. For that, we have been creating our initiative in order to develop artificial intelligence models in which you can interrogate other artificial intelligence. And not only it's because of the speed of the artificial intelligence models, you cannot have a man trying to interrogate another artificial intelligence, because the velocity of humans is not the velocity of the speed of artificial intelligent models, then you need to generate not 20 questions, not 100 questions. You need 1,000 million of questions in order to interrogate artificial intelligence. And with this set of questions and response, you have to reach a level in which you can ensure that you can trace the behavior of your artificial intelligence. Then we have to, with one artificial intelligence model, you evaluate the rest of the artificial intelligence models.
And maybe a tricky question for you and also a lot of people of the audience. If we start using those military agents, AI agents, we'll discuss about the paradox later, but I wanted to ask you, how do you see the chain of command in the decisions?
Well,
probably a really difficult question, but
yes, probably it's very difficult, because when you interrogate a person, you obtain answers, and you cannot trace exactly how this person is thinking and the reason why he's given this answer. And it's probably exactly the same with artificial intelligence. But at the end, if you can be a lot of days examining and interrogating the artificial intelligence model that you are evaluating, at the end you have answers, and you could trace. At least you can expect the same behavior with, if you have same question, you can have always the same answer, and you can trace the behavior. It's only a question of patience.
Perfect. All right, thank you. Now, I please want to ask to change the presentation, because I want everybody to think of a real scenario, and Estefania is going to help us a lot understanding. So let's imagine we have an AI deployed system. But for the record, half of the picture is AI generated, so don't take it badly, but it helps a lot sometimes. So we have an AI developed system. It's active in a conflict zone and is being attacked. So first of all, the data inputs are manipulated. We have the model compromised through, let's say, prompt injections attacks. We also have connectivity degraded, so we have no IT support. We cannot talk to the command. Pressure is, of course, high. We need to make a decision. This is a real operation, not a laboratory. So in the end, the system, as you were mentioning, Soraya, it gives you an answer, a confident answer. Maybe later on you will discover that it was wrong, but at that moment, you only have a second. You need to decide what to trust. You need to decide what to stop. And of course, you need to think about which evidence you want to maintain in order to make the audit later. So please, Estefania, walk through with us and maybe go through the AI lifecycle, explain from your CCM perspective, auditability, certification, mainly if a system is not certified, where do you see the first attacks coming, data, model, operation? I'll give you the floor because you're the expert on this, so please.
Okay, very good summary of my example. Yes, I'm going to tell you how vulnerability can travel through the life cycle of an AI system, and why the certification and evaluation process is not just the absence of the certification and evaluation process is not just a technical gap, but also a strategic vulnerability. Imagine, for instance, a system that uses analysis of satellite images in order to detect movements, military movements in border areas. In this scenario, as many in defense, this scenario combines the use of huge amounts of data, the integration with a command and control system, and the use of computer visual models. In the phase of the design and testing, design and training, many sources, many data sources are used. Sensors, military archives, many of them even classified images, contractors, even open sources. Sometimes in this complex scenario, the chain of custody is not validated, or is not complete, and in this case, you can face the first vulnerability, the data poisoning, when you don't have control of the data. An attacker tries to manipulate a small set of images, but critical images, that teach the system to misclassify. And during the internal testing, all is okay. The AI system seems to be high accuracy. The false positive rates are under an acceptable limit. So the bias, the problem of the bias, remain undetected. In the deployment, due to pressures, political pressures, operational pressures, the system is integrated quickly in the global scenario. So nobody have tested that its behavior under some degraded circumstances. So, okay, when it's used in an operational field, some minimal changes in the images produced by reflections, by shadows, result in a misclassification. And a civil vehicle is detected as a military target. And this is when then is when the problem arises, because there are collateral damages and unnecessary alerts. So when in the post-operation review and update, when the investigators try to find when and why and what happened, this misclassification, they find a black box. They don't have information about the data used in the training phase. They don't have enough information in logs. They don't have anything. They have a black box even for the owner of the system. And with all this information, we can conclude that if the system have gone through a certification and evaluation process, the lack of the evaluation and certification process produce loss of auditability, technical auditability, but the responsibility blurs among all the actors. Nobody can decide who is responsible of this error. And you lose reliability in stress conditions of your system, in acting in stress conditions. And the most important thing is that you lose reliability. You are not a trusted actor in a joint operation, because nobody is going to trust in each other's IA systems if they are not certified. So when you are not, as a state, you are not able to respond and you are not able to just justify your decisions, you don't have only a technical problem, but you have also a political problem, a legal problem, and even a moral problem. So the certification is not a shortcut, acceptable shortcut, because the certification gives you it's a question of digital sovereignty. And I think it's not an alternative. It's the only solution, I think.
And under this scenario that you're talking about and the importance of this auditability and certification, Soraya, from your perspective, if we're talking about that and also thinking on what's been said already about the OWASP top 10 LLM attacks, about the Mitre Atlas. So we have a really good mapping of what we are facing in terms of attacks to the systems. For continuous auditability and real monitoring, so on the real time, the last row, do you, let's call it algorithm awareness. I know you don't like the algorithm consensus because we discussed it.
Yeah.
Do you see that if we have those in place and those are certified, does it make a huge change to have that third row on place?
Yes, when I was before talking about adversarial interrogation, this is because we have a set of questions that we can put in place in order to interrogate our artificial intelligence models. But the responses are important, but the questions even are more important. And if I use standards or I use certain initiatives, of OWASP, LLM, or Mitre Atlas, is because I have something. I have the list of questions. I have the questions of the exams. Maybe using the standardization and certification processes, I could use something that has been already fixed. And the questions are the good questions, and I will have always the same list of questions. For that, the certification processes are very good because I have a fixed framework in which I can base the process of evaluating our artificial intelligence models.
Okay.
Fernando, if I may quickly jump in.
Of course, I was going to ask you, so go ahead.
But I'll be quick. I want to ask my dear friends who are, of course, who are engineers and computer scientists, but you know, for international law, we need to have a responsible human for the error. So we have to have attributability, to have accountability for having a responsible human being. So that's what concerns me, and you have highlighted, of course, the moral and the legal problems, the ethical concerns that arise when we have those lack of auditability problems. So.
No, perfect, because I was going to conclude before moving into the paradox I want to put in place, that we have the AI life cycle, we need assurance for that, and we have traceability and certification, and only if we have those three groups, we're going to have human control over it. If we miss one of these three, we are not controlling we're not governing the risks. So talking about governing risks, we have put in place an AI system that is continuously monitoring another AI system. And that can sound as a paradox of who audits the audit, right? And before moving to the last part of 12 months commitment for the states, I wanted to put in place safeguards and boundaries. You've already mentioned a boundary, Denise, but it's the same question for the three of you. You can express it how you want it. Is if we have, and having this in mind all the time, if a dedicated, so we have dedicated monitoring agent for the deployment military AI, and we have that continuously going on. Do you see that as a net safety gain or as another layer of risks? So if we would put in place this AI system controlling another AI system, What's the biggest benefit you think we have, the biggest risk, and of course, what do you need to put in place in order to trust it? And I think you can complete each other, because you're going to talk about what we need to trust it. You're probably the operational risk, and you're the certifications, but also the benefits go for you, Soraya. So open floor, biggest risk, biggest good part, because of course technology also brings improvements, and also which part of governance to make it trusted.
Fernando, I don't think we should have an AI system monitoring an AI system.
No think or yes think?
We shouldn't have.
Then you need
It would be very complex for international law, for international humanitarian law, for this system to be compliant, I think. I would prefer to have Estefania or Soraya be in charge of the monitoring of that AI system.
So
somebody as apt as they are.
The biggest risk is that we don't put humans in control of it.
Right, so I think, Fernando, we should start always from the design stage, right? So establishing contours, maybe red lines, clearly outlined specifications, right? We have a few IEEE reports that are fantastic. I have the author of one of them sitting right here, Ariel Kohn. And yes, right there. So we should always have the systems being human aligned, human compatible. Are they human compatible? For what I'm hearing from my engineers, I don't know. It's uncertain.
But then your biggest benefit?
I understand it sounds difficult how to compare the behavior of different artificial intelligence models, but at the end it's software that we have programmed. It's line codes. And in the same way we evaluate and certify in the normal software, and we have different levels of security. For example, in common criteria, when we are evaluating, we have EL1, EL2, EL4. Then we can do more or less the same. Not exactly the same, but we have to ensure that the code is secure. And then you have to challenge our artificial intelligence models. But of course, at the end, you have man in the loop. The final decision and the information given by the artificial intelligence agents that are in charge of auditing, validating, and supervising, you have human in the loop. Of course, this is absolutely necessary.
But I'm pretty sure that the thing that puts you together is the certification that you may put in place. Stefania.
Yeah, but the question is, who controls the controller? Who audits the auditor? I think, okay, the creation of agents increments the exposition, the digital exposure of the system. So I think the use of these agents must be very controlled. The agents must be certified. And we think that it should be another actor of different nature, the controller of the controllers, maybe a human, maybe, but different technology, because all the AI systems are exposed to the same vulnerabilities. So if one is compromised, why not the other? No? It's more or less our posture. And the certification always.
Always put in place, of course.
Yeah.
So in this conversation, Denise, in a clear statement already, what should never be delegated to AI?
Again, the control and command of
maybe we put it to
Soraya. Nuclear weapons, but
she's going to put the operations with AI, with the safety of the safeguards.
Fernando, I think I see that we are putting the horses in front of the cart. Is that the expression? There are so many expressions in English, right? I'm married to an American and I learn a new expression every day. So, well, shouldn't we be more vigilant, right? And establish more robust procedures as they have so eloquently outlined? Be sure that everybody's abiding by the same procedures, commonly established norms. What happens when these systems interact with other systems from other countries? Then we have major problems.
Well, I think your worry is really taken care by both Ministry of Defense and also the CC. And I think they make the operational tactics, but they always have the certification on mind, and they're not going to delegate everything without the human control. That we were talking that we need AI cycle and completed traceability and auditability, and then we only have human control, but you need to keep those three. So so we have the boundaries, we have the safeguards. Let's move to just the final part and what states can do in the next 12 months, all right? So I wanted to ask you if you could already put on place something to start next Monday, and that maybe in Geneva or maybe from 1 year now, so Coruña too, what has been done already that realistically we, the states, can move. So one implementation step, Estefania, please, if you can go, and then we'll finish with you.
In CCN, we are developing a methodology for the IA evaluation, the IA evaluation. We think we are going to finish the first draft by June or June, before summer. And the second step will be the creation of a scheme, a certification scheme, and the certification body. We already have our certification body, not for AI, but for other ICT products. And we need to establish all the procedures in order to create this certification body and offer this service to the public sector.
Perfect. And a commitment we can have for the next 12 months that we can realistically do? Soraya?
In the Ministry of Defense, each time we have to evaluate something related to security to go to CCN guidelines. And then we adopt these guidelines. We expect in less than 12 months to have something to read and to apply immediately, because we are military and we follow the orders. As soon as they have something, we will apply. In the meantime, we are using initiatives that we have found in, for example, Mitre, Atlas, or OWASP, and we are using this list of thousand of questions, and once we have something in Spain or another international initiatives, we will adopt as soon as possible in order to have a clear picture of what we have to do in order to evaluate artificial intelligence models.
Perfect. And from your perspective, and I also wanted to ask you, listening to them and from your international experience, commitment for the states, and where do you see Spain in the positive move of the AI in the military system?
Oh, Fernando, I see Spain as the leader of this for the European Union.
Well, take credit for that, huh?
Spain has done so much work in the last year. Bravo. Espectacular, no? We have Reaim 3, we have the Spanish leading the formation of the conversations that led to the scientific panel at the UN, the establishment of the Global Governance Dialogue, and that was done with Costa Rica. So I don't know who is going to host the 4th summit on Reaim, but that will be only in 1 year or over a year. So I would say we have 6 months until June, right? Oops, less than 6 months. And these are the first conversations, 3 days that are going to happen in Geneva at the end of June. And I will be there with 28 young students, undergrads, who all want to see really frameworks to protect future generations, them who are now 19, 20, and their children. So what are we going to put in place to protect future generations? We are running out of time, Fernando. I have been observing all this diplomacy for the last 13 years when it all started, and the window of opportunity is closing. So I know there are so many incredibly knowledgeable and brave people, skilled like yourselves, working on this, and so many, all of you sitting in front of us. But we need to accelerate the effort. So we have to hit the ground running in Geneva. So we have to indeed actionable steps, leveling the playing field, conversations that should occur before Geneva with Spain and other middle powers, small powers, countries that have been working together, Brazil, Austria, Costa Rica. I don't want to mention countries by name, but I couldn't resist, I'm so sorry. But indeed, and indeed create a real coalition that could speak perhaps with one voice, being inclusive. Reaim is very inclusive, but we need more inclusivity of all countries from the Global South in particular to bridge that digital divide that is just becoming wider. So the Secretary General of the UN has published a report, and there are many actionable steps there on AI in the military that came up as a result of the General Assembly resolutions in 2024 and 2025. So this report is going to be the basis of the conversations in Geneva. So we should all study this report. It has the views of many member states, and they were all very thoughtful in publishing those views. So we should really anchor ourselves on those positions to prepare for Geneva and address the most urgent issues and make a way to forge cooperation with all countries leading up to that moment, and then taking up again at Reaim 4.
Okay. Well, we take that homework to study it and to work now for the Geneva. We take the word that the certification schemes are almost developed, let's say, and that we will trust them.
I invite the to join our group in order to coordinate efforts.
In the governance, cooperation is needed, and of course, also from the civil part, the Ministry for Digital Transformation as well, we can of course put our view in that and help. So I'm also mentioning that from our perspective. Unless there is anything you've missed to say and you would say to the audience for the certification for the good part of the operational side or the governance. I think we've mentioned the 3 rows, the human control gates we have, traceability and logs, continuous audit and monitoring. And I wanted to mention here that we're not talking about sci-fi. Maybe you don't like the word Skynet and these kind of things. We're talking, in reality, is about the boring stuff, right? So it's having audits, reports, it's about auditability, continuous, some people call it bureaucracy, of course, but it's these things that keep the human under control of the AI systems, as you were mentioning. So as long as we have those logs, those tests, all this certification, clear responsibility in the chain of command for the decisions that we're making, we will be able to trace everything we're doing, to test it, to put it on place, and of course to govern all the risks that we have. So I only can mention that we have work to do, but I can see that we're going in the right direction. So no final statement for you. I'm giving you the floor, but I wanted to give you then thank you very much for all your contributions. As mentioned, I take the word of the homework and also that you put in place. The ministry is also with you. So thank you very much, everybody, for coming here and listening. Pleasure.
Thank you so much. Muchas gracias, maravilloso.
Thank you, Fernando. Thank you, panelists. That was very insightful. I think we all have a lot to think about tonight on our way back home. Our next section will be Framework for Responsible Industry Behavior on AI in the Military Domain. If you are interested in seeing this session, please just stay where you are, because we are just getting the mics ready for the speakers, and we will be back in just 1 more minute. So as I said, next session, Framework for Responsible Industry Behavior on AI in the Military Domain, in just 1 or 2 minutes. Thank you. Hello, everyone, and thank you for your patience. As I mentioned before, our next session will present the framework of responsible industry behavior for AI in the military domain, which is a joint initiative led by UNIDIR and OHCHR. It will be moderated by Dr. Yasmin Afina, researcher for the Security and Technology Program at UNIDIR and a founding member of their flagship AI Security and Ethics Initiative. So please, everyone take your seats and we can welcome them on stage with a big applause. Please, thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you everyone for staying, and I do realize this is the last panel standing between you and lunch, so I do appreciate you staying for what promises to be a very exciting session for us to launch the framework of responsible industry behavior for AI in the military domain. So now I would like to give the floor to Dr. Giacomo Persi Paoli, head of the Security and Technology Program of UNIDIR, for some introductory remarks before we proceed with the panel discussion. Giacomo, please, you have the floor.
No? There we go. Thank you, Yasmin. And once again, let me extend my gratitude to all of you for staying with us and to share with us this important moment as we're launching the framework of responsible industry behavior for AI in the military domain. I think this is a new flagship event that UNIDIR is very pleased to launch in cooperation with the Office of the High Commissioner of Human Rights. It's going to be a co-led initiative which I think addresses a critical point. We have heard over the last couple of days and in previous summits and over the course of the last 3 years on deliberations on responsible AI in the military domain, how important it is to have industry being part of the solution. So I think there is a general agreement that the responsible AI in the military domain agenda is a shared agenda between states, industry, civil society. Although there hasn't really been a clear reference framework that actually articulates what is the role of industry, what can industry actually do, how can we translate some of the key principles that we have agreed on over the last few years into concrete measures that industry can then implement, but that can also state can use to be more intelligent customers in their interactions with industry. So the purpose of this framework is not to create new rules, new norms, new laws, but to take what already exists and develop guidelines that both industry and states can use to really advance the agenda of responsible AI in the military domain. So we're very excited to launch this new initiative that will hopefully produce over the course of the next few months. We know this is not an easy task, but we do think that it's a worthwhile one. And we hope that by the time we reconvene again for the next Reaim Summit, wherever and whenever it might be, that we will have something concrete to show to the community. With that, back to you, Yasmin. Thank you.
Thank you, Giacomo. So as you've said, we've heard a lot of feedback and a lot of desire from governments, from civil society, from industries themselves to see a structured engagement with regards to responsible AI in the military domain. And for that, I'm very pleased to be joined by a stellar panel for our discussions. So I will spare with you the introductions of each of them because you have them on the screen. But before I start, I also wanted to say that on the right side and the left side of the podium, you have a very nicely displayed poster for the framework with a QR code that leads you to the web page dedicated to the framework if you would like to see more details. So on that note, I would like to kickstart our discussions with Pak Shun, if I may. You served as a commissioner for the Global Commission on Responsible AI in the military domain. You were just on the panel earlier, and its work culminated in an excellent report that we've seen. And those included recommendations for industries. And so drawing on your experience, I was wondering if you could please share a few thoughts as to what is the value of structured industry engagement for governments. Shun, over to you.
Well, thanks very much for the invitation. So I'm back in the same seat after 2 panels. I think the value of engagement with the industry for governments, I think there are a few areas. One is really access to the latest technology and the latest developments that industry is responsible for. Previously, when we understand military developments, there's a lot of work that is done very tightly between militaries and what we call prime contractors. This situation has changed with emerging technologies. A lot of the developments are driven from civilian sectors. Companies are moving much faster in developing capabilities than what militaries can field, and therefore there's a lot of interest from militaries to think about making their procurement process more agile and more responsive to the latest development in technology. And in that regard, a structured engagement with the industry allows militaries to keep up with what is the latest and have an opportunity to also shape and provide demand signals to what ought to be developed, what ought to be designed in a way that meet mission objectives. I think for the people wearing uniform in the room, the focus really is to try to achieve the mission that's assigned to you with the capabilities that you are given, and the ability to engage upstream with industries to develop those capabilities that help you achieve that mission better is always going to be the preoccupation. And with AI developing capabilities that are much faster than what we are used to fielding in different areas, structured engagement allow you to keep up to date with what is available and to provide some area of influence such that the industry will be able to develop the issues or the capabilities that militaries want. So I think, broadly speaking, the ability to access the latest information, the ability to provide guidance or some sort of demand signal on what ought to be developed, what ought to be designed. This is where a structured engagement has to continue moving forward, especially as emerging technologies develop very, very quickly.
Thank you very much, Shun. And I almost see a sort of symbiotic relationship between both sides with respect to the development of responsible AI in the military domain, but also ensuring of that responsible characteristic throughout the life cycle of the technology. So now I would like to turn to Atsushi on my right. You work within the research branch of a company, Fujitsu Defense and National Security, and you have done a lot of work on foresight, but also defense planning. In an era where we see a trend towards increased autonomy, and it's something we've discussed for a long time, how could the participation to initiatives such as the framework reinforce future planning, national security, and resilience? Atsushi, over to you.
Thank you, Yasmin. And first of all, I really appreciate this wonderful opportunity to participate in this discussion today. And in response to your question, so I'd like to share my perspective on the current trajectory surrounding autonomous weapon systems, reflect on the role of industry, and discuss why it is becoming increasingly important to approach these issues through a shared industry framework. So as a starting point, from the perspective of military rationality, I believe that the operation of autonomous weapon systems will be increasingly shifting from humans in the loop toward humans on the loop. And by humans on the loop, I refer to a situation in which an autonomous system operates within a defined mission scope while humans continuously monitor its behavior and retain the ability to intervene when necessary. And of course, for highly lethal weapon systems, humans in the loop may continue to be required. However, more broadly, humans on the loop may become a new baseline with the emergence of agentic AI and increasingly autonomous capabilities of platforms. So I see this trend as largely unavoidable. And from this perspective, the key question becomes how operators can employ these systems in a way that they can trust both technically and institutionally. And in addition, there are serious challenges in contested anti-access area denial environments when systems, for example, become out of loop, and how do we bring them back under meaningful human supervision and command? And how do we prevent systems from becoming out of the loop in the first place due to jamming, cyber interference, and degraded communications? And if these issues are not adequately addressed, the systems will not be trustworthy for operators. And more importantly, they may create conditions for unintended military incidents or escalation. And I think this is one of the outcomes that governments and militaries most want to avoid. And in this respect, I believe there is important common ground across countries. And seen this way, the emphasis in the industry work on compliance with international humanitarian law, specifically in the principles of distinction, proportionality, and precaution, is extremely important. And these principles matter not only ethically, but also because prioritizing IHL can help reduce the risk of unintended escalation, in my perspective. And it can also contribute to improving the technical and institutional trustworthiness of platforms that are becoming increasingly autonomous. And while the responsibility for IHO compliance lies ultimately with military operators who actually employ force, industry plays a crucial role by shaping these systems across their entire life cycle. For example, industry can enhance trust through rigorous testing and evaluation, continuous updates, support for interoperability among allied systems, and as we discussed yesterday, the development of a shared technical language and common concepts across the ecosystem. And at the same time, when we discuss a framework for industry, we also need to be clear about what we mean by industry. It includes traditional defense primes, suppliers at different tiers, and as well as newer actors such as big technology companies and startups. And their incentives, interests, and roles differ significantly. And fundamentally, the design of such a framework requires close and sustained communication with their customers, namely governments and military operators. And in particular, for principles such as IHL compliance in the context of emerging autonomous systems, I think the stakeholders need a shared understanding of what is actually required at the operational and technical level. And when governments and militaries and industry align on these expectations, they can then be reflected in requirements and procurement criteria. So looking ahead, the use of AI to gain military advantage will continue to accelerate. OODA loops will become faster, and in some cases, this may create conditions in which escalation becomes more likely. So precisely because of these risks, the importance of industry, which develops and sustains weapon system, will only grow, I think. So I hope this framework will make a meaningful contribution to reducing these risks and support more informed capability development and the planning and decision-making for national security and resilience. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Atsushi, for this very comprehensive overview and also how the framework will help mitigate the risks that are shared across industries but also governments. So now, Michael, I would like to turn to you. Microsoft has been a fervent champion and collaborator of UNIDIR's work for years now. And so from your perspective and that of an organization as big as Microsoft, what would be the value of such framework and what is really the incentive, but also for other companies with us today, in contributing to this UN-led work? Michael, over to you.
Thank you, Yasmin, and thank you to the government of Spain for successfully hosting the third Reaim Summit. As Dr. Robin Geis said in one of the opening sessions this morning, we are at an inflection point. Many actors agree on high-level principles, but the actual implementation is at times inconsistent, unclear, and uncertain. And without a shared implementation approach, I think we have the opposite of the benefits which Pak Shun spoke about in terms of structured engagement. The reality is, at the moment, we have very fragmented state expectations, uneven supplier practices, and often gaps in trust and in credibility, including for companies who are seeking to act in good faith. One of the key reasons for this gap is that the concept or the definition of what responsible looks like, it needs to be grounded in something, it needs to be anchored in something. Namely, it needs to be grounded in existing international law, including international humanitarian law and international human rights law. It needs to be grounded in agreed norms and responsible behavior expectations in related domains, and also in emergent principles coming from Reaim and other processes. Companies are increasingly expected to demonstrate an understanding of these anchors, but actually not many companies have a practical or authoritative ways to consistently translate those principles into life cycle decisions, evidence, and communication. I think realistically, if we were to survey companies, whether they are large tech companies, SMEs, traditional defense primes, or integrators, including the companies who are most active in the Reaim process, if you were to ask them, could you define or explain what responsible corporate policy looks like, or what responsible due diligence looks like, or what responsible transparency looks like, or what responsible remedy looks like, I think many would struggle to give you a meaningful answer, and absolutely you would find very inconsistent answers. But now with the Reaim process, moving from the call to action, the blueprint to action, now the pathways to action, we are absolutely at a time to help bring this framework to life. So what is the value of a framework from an industry perspective? I think a practical framework will translate legal and normative anchors into responsible design and decision-making in consistent ways across life cycles and make that implementable across different functions within companies. I think it also helps to close a recurring gap, which is that many assurance approaches at the moment really focus on technical performance and safety, but do not clearly connect that with international law and norms. And also, as a consequence, it can strengthen safety and resilience by normalizing assurance practices while staying aligned with legal and normative baselines that define responsible. Yasmin, you asked what are the incentives for companies. I think they are varied. So practicality, predictability, and clarity. So clearer expectations from states to reduce legal, commercial, and reputational uncertainty. Again, we can go a long way to reducing the fragmentation, reducing the duplicative and inconsistent procurement demands that are out there, and then building trust and credibility. Because companies will really benefit when their claims can be substantiated with shared evidence and approaches, especially when those claims can be grounded in traceable international law norms and principles, rather than just, at times, marketing language. So what does responsible behavior mean in practice? I think it's not about abstract ethics, but instead it's a practical, disciplined approach grounded in existing law and norms. So being clear about intended uses and limitations, building in testing, security, and resilience from the start, and documenting and communicating what customers need to operate safely and lawfully, but of course within the boundaries of confidentiality and national security constraints. It also leads to more clarity on different roles. So states make sovereign decisions on doctrine, use, and legal compliance. Industry, though, is responsible for product integrity, truthful claims, and support, including clarity on limitations. So what should the framework aim to produce in order for it to be viable? I think it needs to be lifecycle based and modular. It needs to be explicitly grounded in international law and norms with clear reference points to practical methodologies to translate those principles. And also it needs to be flexible across sectors so that it can be used by the different types of companies that are out there. But it also needs to be structured in a way that is explicitly complementary to state processes. So not a parallel norm-setting track, not a certification regime, and not a one-size-fits-all standard. Reaim participants, really everyone in this room, are at the forefront of being able to identify what you currently struggle to translate into international law norms and emergent principles into concrete requirement and evidence, and also to help define expectations which would be feasible across different business models and maturity levels. And I think also best placed to help pressure test the framework as it's being developed to ensure it is usable, so that it supports real implementation by product procurement and oversight teams. Genuinely, if this project succeeds, I think it will make responsible behavior much more consistent, much more accessible, and easier to scale. And it will do so in alignment with international law, norms, and principles in support of the Reaim process and responsible AI in general. And there is no one better to do that than UNIDIA and OHCHR.
Thank you very much, Michael. I do take away from your remarks really the desire to avoid fragmentation, but actually get into coherence and consistency. And I think this is the key. So these are two key words that we've heard as well across the past 2 days. So now I would like to give the floor to Giacomo to take us to the second half of this panel to do a deep dive on the framework. Giacomo, please, over to you.
Thank you, Yasmin. And absolutely, we've heard different perspectives on why having an initiative like the framework is a good idea. So let's now try to unpack a little bit more about what the framework is supposed to do. What is it? So Yasmin, remove your hat of moderator and you're now a speaker. But I would like to come to you to help the audience understand how did the idea of the framework came to be? Who would be benefiting from the framework, how and why?
Sure, thank you, Giacomo. And now putting my speaker hat. So the idea of the framework really was really a natural evolution of our projects, but also our engagements with states, but also multi-stakeholders alike with respect to responsible AI in the military domain. So just a couple of years ago, we launched a multi-stakeholder platform with a group of experts to look at the implications of AI and security through the Roundtable for AI Security and Ethics, or RAISE, where we have, for example, quite a few, all of them are members of RAISE. And we saw really, we really started seeing the emergence of this acknowledgement that we really needed some consistent and coherent framework to engage with industries in acknowledgement of their role throughout the life cycle of the technology. So not just as suppliers, but also those that maintain the technology and potentially might be involved in auditing and also further testing or even decommissioning of these technologies. And as part of that as well, yesterday we had a session on the regional consultations for Reaim from last year in 2025, and we've heard consistently across all of the regions that states would really want to see structured engagement with industries. How does that look like? Who should do it? We don't really have a perfect answer, but I think we want to have a go at it. I think it's going to be difficult. It's going to be a long road. But we also really acknowledge the fact that it needs to be a collaborative project. It should not be something that is too prescriptive. It's not something that the UN is preaching towards industries or governments as to how they should approach responsible AI in the military domain. But it's really about providing a platform to really concretize everything and connect the dots. So as Giacomo and Michael mentioned, it's not really about creating new norms. It's absolutely not that. It's really seeking complementarity and reinforcing, providing coherence, and building bridges across the different sectors. So it's really about benefiting governments with respect to clarity on, for example, what they could demand from industries for the procurement of AI in the military domain. We've heard a lot through the regional consultations that a lot of states are perceiving themselves as customers. And it might be the reality in certain regions. So how can they be intelligent customers and responsible customers? Because in the end, if you make the right demands to procurement processes, but also even post-sales, that's what makes you a responsible customer and also a responsible user. For industries, that provides clarity of expectations and also a way of understanding as well how could they best meet the expectations of states as they continuously adopt and reinforce and consolidate these responsible AI principles that we see emerging through Reaim, but also in other processes such as the UN. And so out of all of this, we really wanted to connect the dots, and through this framework, we're really hoping to launch something and to create a new pathway to complement all the efforts that are going on. Again, it seeks to be very collaborative. We seek to engage and to consult very closely, not only with industries, but also governments, to really make sure that it is something that is useful. And for that, we're also very grateful for the partnership with the OHCHR because of their extensive engagement with businesses with regards to human rights. Thank you.
Thank you, Yasmin. I actually want to pick up on your last point and go to Eric, because OHCHR has a long-standing and successful track record of engaging businesses in the context of human rights. And we'll be curious to know what are some of your thoughts on the state of affairs when it comes to industry engagement in the context of AI in the military domain. What is the added value that you think a project like the framework could bring to the work of OHCHR in this space?
Thank you, Giacomo. Well, first of all, I mean, responsible business conduct is something that has been quite prominent in the public discourse for some decades by now. I mean, this is illustrated by the public court cases, by the very public court cases on allegations of violations of human rights or damages to the environment. generalization of corporate social responsibility departments in companies or similar departments, the adoption already in 2011 of the UN Guiding Principles on Business and Human Rights, and the establishment by the Human Rights Council of the Working Group on Business and Human Rights. But with the exception of private and military security companies, discussions around responsible business conduct for companies operating in the military domain have been quite limited up to now. And what we have noted is that there's been quite a fragmented uptake of the guiding principles on business and human rights by tech companies in general, not only in the military domain, but it is particularly concerning with regards to companies involved in use cases that on their face pose high risks in terms of human rights and international humanitarian law, such as those from the defense sector, those developing surveillance tools, and those providing services to the military. So while the Reaim process has, I really believe, begun to address the role of businesses by adopting from the outset a multi-stakeholder approach, discussions around the legal norms have centered around IHL and international humanitarian law. And what we've observed is that in most presentations by companies, reference is only made to the need to ensure the compliance of their products with international humanitarian law, and that's one limitation that we've observed. It's quite promising to see companies expressing the need for assistance in translating IHL norms in their AI products and the practical implementation. But it's important to note that human rights remains applicable in conflict and is particularly relevant to when looking at the whole life cycle. Indeed, AI tools are often developed based on data sets collected during peacetime, and therefore that's not at all regulated by international humanitarian law, and companies need to ensure that they're respecting international human rights norms and national human rights norms in relation to privacy, for example. There's also the addition that most AI technologies, whether initially designed for civilian or military use, are inherently dual use and readily repurposed, blurring the line between civilian or law enforcement use and military applications. So this raises, as I mentioned, concerns around privacy, discriminatory outcomes, which are standards that are in existence in IHL, but very well developed in international human rights law. With regards to use of force, this is particularly concerning because there's really different standards on use of force between conduct of hostility settings and law enforcement settings, even in armed conflict for law enforcement settings. The other point also about why human rights is important is that most of the discussions that I've seen here in the Reaim context give the impression that there's a presumption that military applications of AI will be used in interstate armed conflicts. But the reality is that the vast majority of armed conflicts today are non-international in nature, conflicts for which human rights law is even more relevant and applicable, for example, in relation to AI applications related to surveillance and detention. So with regards to the added value of this framework for the work of OHCHR, well, the UN Guiding Principles on Human Rights, Businesses and Human Rights recognizes that operations by businesses in conflict areas or connected to armed conflicts represent greater risks and therefore require the exercise of a heightened due diligence. But it is difficult for corporations to practically understand what this heightened due diligence means. And a framework like the one we're discussing would really help address this, so that would assist us. Such a framework would also enrich, OHCHR's BTech project, which is a project that is aimed at providing technical guidance and specific resources to companies in the tech sector, but also to states and other key drivers of responsible conduct, including investors. Based on our experience of working with companies in the context of this project, we've identified the need to work with specific subsegment of tech companies, namely those involved in the development and deployment of use of AI in the military, and this gives us this framework gives us this opportunity to do that. Also, the experience on BTech has taught us the importance of working collaboratively and having companies also really provide their inputs and give and underline what is important for them and what is practically implementable for them. So their input is essential. And finally, this framework would allow us, as OHHR, to provide advice that deal with the very specific challenges that companies developing AI tool used in the military domain face. In particular, how to practically, coming back to this, to what Michael was saying, practically incorporate international human rights law norms and principles and human rights requirements in their products and services.
Thank you, Eric. I think we are, as we are approaching the end of this segment and lunch, I guess, I would just like to take a couple of minutes to share with you a few more insights into the framework, the next steps, how you can engage if you're interested. First, if we think about the impact that we're trying to have through this framework, I think we see this as first and foremost as a living document. I think it's unrealistic to imagine that we spend the next 12, 18 months to develop a framework, and then that framework is going to remain a static document valid for the foreseeable future. Given how technology is evolving, given how industry practices are being refined and evolving as well as technology does, I think we see this really as a living document. So ultimately, the long-term impact that we're hoping to have is to generate a more explainable, predictable, and transparent relationship between industry and their customers and states when it comes to AI in the military domain. We want really to create a tool that facilitates through shared language, shared concepts, shared mutual understanding, actually more than shared understanding, of what are the needs, what are the expectations, noting that this may evolve over time. So that is something that we are considering already. In the short term, what we really want to demonstrate is the first step is often the most complicated one. So we need to start, because starting a process like this, I think, sends a strong signal that the community is not only talking about these issues, but is willing to actually do something and start a process of change. So starting is going to be the first step that you're all witnessing today with the public launch. Now that everyone knows that we're doing this, we can't hide anymore. It's on our website. You will find on the website, you will also find an email address that you can use if you're interested in taking part of this. And particularly, this is a call that I'm making to all of the different industry representatives that are in the room with us. As it was already mentioned by the speakers, we are not trying to develop something for you. We want to develop it with you so that you can then actually use it, because this isn't a scenario in which any UN organization has the understanding and expertise or can claim to have the understanding of expertise that would be needed to develop something like this without your involvement. So please, do engage with us. Reach out if you want to be part of this initiative that hopefully over the course of the next few months will really start to take traction. This will be one of the flagship initiatives that will be hosted under a new framework or a new initiative at UNIDIR that we're planning to launch in the coming weeks or few months, which is going to be a center of excellence on AI, peace, and security that will provide an overarching, if you want, entity within UNIDIR or a specialized center within UNIDIR where a lot of the initiatives that we're currently running will find a permanent home. So also watch this space if you're interested in knowing more about the Center of Excellence. Hopefully more information will be available soon. With that, I do encourage you once again to go on our website, familiarize yourself with the information that is out there, and if you're interested and would like to be involved, do not hesitate to be in touch. I'm very happy to wrap up this panel, thanking you all for taking the time to join us. Thank all of our excellent speakers, Yasmin, speaker and co-moderator of this session, and I wish you bon appetit and a great continuation of the day. Thank you.
First of all, I wanted to thank our speakers and congratulations on your initiative. It's wonderful and very inspiring. Now, the only thing left to do is say goodbye. I can share with you that the summit has been a great success. Just some quick numbers. We managed, it's 1,200 of us, 1,200 participants in total, 85 different countries, 114 speakers, and 24 companies that participated in the stands of our AI use case exhibition. I think these numbers show just how good this edition was. I want to once again thank our hosts, the co-organizers, the Ministry for Foreign Affairs, European Union and Cooperation, and also the Ministry of Defense. And of course, this summit was supported by the Council of A Coruña and the Provincial Council of A Coruña. Just to wrap up, it's very difficult to summarize what 2 days of conferences and panels is, but I have decided just to end with a quote from Mary Shelley, a pioneer who managed to change our perspective on AI, even though she was born in the 1700s, and it's a show of how culture can affect how society perceives new technology and AI. And the quote says, "Everything must have a beginning, and that beginning must be linked to something that went before." This is me urging everyone in this room to please use your previous and extensive knowledge and your experiences, the good ones and even the bad ones, to ensure us a prosperous future, where military AI is not only responsible, but also compliant with international law and our most fundamental principles as humans. I hope you enjoy your lunch. I hope you have enjoyed the summit and your stay in A Coruña. And thank you very much.